Welcome to my podcast, Today's Dream, Tomorrow's Reality. My name is Vicki Poole. I'm a master transformational coach and hypnotist specializing in habit change. And this podcast is sponsored by the Enlightened Peach. And this podcast is all about embracing our Mosaic life. And some of you may ask, what is a Mosaic life anyway? Well, it is recognizing that all the pieces of our life, the good, the bad, the indifferent, have all come together to make us who we are. Change any one thing and we are different. With that in mind, I invite you to embrace your perceived imperfections and celebrate who you are. This podcast is unedited and raw, just like life. And I am your host, and I have a special guest today I will introduce in just a moment. But before I do, I want to ask you to do me a solid. I want to have you to leave a comment, ask a question, and like, subscribe, and share, because I have amazing guests on my podcast. And the only way I get their message out even further is with your help. So I'm asking you to leave a comment, a message. Remember to like, subscribe, and share. So now let's get started. So I'm so excited to introduce Wendy Macdowall. Is it Dowell? Is that how you say it? Yep. Wendy Macdowall here right now. And we actually met in a group that we were both in. And I had said something about my podcast, and then she really wanted to be on here. So I am so grateful to have you here and share your story, because you've got some twists and turns from a little bit that I know of your story. So I'm really excited to dive in. And like I explained before we got on here, I feel like we're sitting on my sofa. We're just having a cup of tea or a glass of wine, depending on who you are. And we're just getting to know each other. And so I love having these conversations and just going over your life and seeing what's important to you. But if you have something that you want to say, you might could tell us, a little bit about where you're from. I know you're married now, and I think you've got children. So just tell them a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I am so excited to be here because everything about what you just said when I was reading up about your podcast really speaks to me. I love the work you do. So thank you for
Thank
allowing me
you.
to share this space with you. So I am currently living in Michigan, just outside of Ann Arbor, a little town called Ypsilanti. It really drives people crazy when I send it to them in a message because they don't begin to know how to pronounce it.
I know.
It starts
Well,
with
see, one of the
Y.
reasons why I didn't say you were from Michigan at all is because I thought I've got to say that other part, and I don't know how. So
Yep. And I have been married to my awesome husband for only about a year and a half, but we've been
okay.
together longer than that. And before that, I was married before. That's a whole can of worms we might get into at some point. And I have 3 children from then, and they're all adults now and all boys doing really well with their lives. And I have a gift daughter in the mix. So
Oh,
life's kind of
nice.
first grandbaby this last year. So it's
Ooh,
exciting.
congratulations. Oh, those grandbabies are amazing, aren't they?
Oh, she's amazing. She's perfect.
Yes, you get to spoil them, do all the things, treat them, and then you hand them back, and you get to be the weekend warrior, or whatever, the person that's always at their aid. You're the fun one, right?
Yeah, so good.
Yeah. So how old is she?
Oh, she is only 9 months old, I think. 8, 9 months.
Okay, well,
More
you'll
in
get
there.
more of that as she gets a little bit older. It's like, I will call what's she gonna call you?
Oh, Grammy.
Grammy? I'll call my Grammy. I can see it now, the little head bob and the whole thing. I'm telling you, it's coming. Be prepared, be
Oh, I'm
prepared.
ready for it.
All right, so I know I do want to dive a little bit into your first marriage, but before we do that, I want to ask you, what is your favorite memory from when you were very young?
Ooh.
And I don't know why. That's the first time I've ever asked this, but it just seemed like the thing to ask.
Um, I think, gosh, there's so many good things. Um,
Well, that's a good thing.
yeah, yeah. What first comes to mind is the first time I really went away from home for any length of time, my grandparents, we call them Granny Witch and Papa, and they came and picked us up and in Washington State, and we drove down to California, and we spent the whole summer, my brother and I, down there in California,
Oh, wow.
going to various relatives for a week at a time, and got to see all different parts of Southern California, and it was just really amazing.
Well, that sounds amazing. I've always been envious of people that would say, yes, I went and spent the summer with my grandparents. I thought, what? It was just mind-boggling to me. Of course, my grandparents didn't live that far away from me. So, it's probably why. But anyway, it's always been an amazing thing to me when somebody can do that. So you were not only spent time with your grandparents, but you got to visit several different family members, right?
Yep, and do a lot of things that I'd never done before. That was the first time I stayed up all night while we were driving. I just stayed up all night and watched the sunrise, which
Oh
I'd
my
never done that before.
gosh.
I think I was 11 or 12. I went to my first professional baseball game. I went to SeaWorld, and just spending time at the beach. It was really an awesome trip for a person that age. It was just like,
Yeah, yeah. So when is the last time you thought about that?
oh, it's been years.
Yeah. Well, for whatever reason, I was led to ask you that question. So it must be a reason that it's supposed to be in the top of your mind. And maybe it's to just give you one of those places of all of a sudden, when you try to think of a happy thought, that might be the next one that pops in now.
Yeah.
Yeah, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
just like I'm just like, oh yeah, that was really amazing. And it's funny, when you're a kid, you don't realize
You
how
don't
amazing
appreciate
it
it.
is.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
I was just bopping along having a good time, and now I look back at that, and I was like, that's where I got that itch to travel. That now is like one of my biggest driving forces. I love travel.
Yeah, I remember seeing something in your bio thing that you sent me, or the Google Doc that you filled out, that you traveled with your son. I think maybe
Hmm.
I know you said you had some kind of domestic violence or whatever, right? And it's something like, I guess from what you had written, and you can elaborate on this, it was when you left that relationship, you and your son traveled.
Yeah,
Did I read it
I
right?
yeah, absolutely. And it was really gosh, I wouldn't trade that time for anything. That's like very near and dear to my heart. It's my youngest son. The other two were already grown and gone. And I knew I had to get out of Dodge, and I knew I had to get far, far away, because if you know anything about how DV works, domestic violence, you have a tendency to go back.
Uh-huh.
So I wanted to make sure that did not happen.
Yeah.
And so I bugged all the way out, and I had an opportunity for a job, I thought, in Southern California. I got hired on by a friend of mine to be his executive admin in a tech startup, and it was super exciting. We were going to be making TV shows, and I told him, I said, "Are you sure? Are you sure, buddy? Because I'm packing up my house, I'm bringing my kid and my dog, and I'm on my way." And he's like, "Yeah, I've got a corporate apartment right on the beach in Santa Monica for you. It's going to be amazing."
Oh, wow.
And the apartment building was amazing. I got to see it. Um, Unfortunately, funding did not transpire. So here I was with all my earthly possessions, my kid and my dog, in this car, and like, what do I do now? So we just knocked around for a while. We spent about
How old was he?
he was 17.
Okay. So he wasn't
Yeah.
a baby.
No,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
not at all.
Okay.
So we just kind of were traveling buddies for a while. We knocked around, we went back and forth between my mom's house out in Eastern California and then back to LA, thinking maybe things were coming up. But we stayed in different Airbnbs, and my son had been in culinary school. So one of the Airbnbs we stayed in, he cooked a whole Thanksgiving dinner for the other guests, because this person had multiple
Oh,
guests at a time.
wow.
And so we got to meet all these really amazing people. There was a jazz musician and her husband that was hosting us for a while, and we sat on their patio and sang songs and drank wine. Well, I drank wine, my son didn't. And then when it became clear that the job was just not going to happen, and my nest egg was kind of dwindling, I thought, well, this is great and that's fantastic. We're having a grand time, but it's not real sustainable. So then we traveled from there, heading towards Chattanooga, Tennessee, because I had family there, and that's where we were going to settle down. But along the way, we stopped in Dallas and I got to meet my baby sister that I never knew I had. She is about the same age as my middle son. So
Mm.
she was a surprise to us. And we actually spent Christmas with her in Dallas, and she and I walked around at this park, and we did so much stuff, and it was a brilliant, beautiful day. It was 70 degrees on Christmas Day. And then, but my son and I, this whole time, were just driving. I mean, he was in charge of the playlist, and, you know, we just pulled off and did whatever we felt like doing because there was no hurry. I didn't have anywhere I had to be. And so it was just a really connective time for both of us. And I will treasure that till the day I die. It was just a beautiful, wonderful adventure. We
It
just
sounds like
kind
it.
of blew with the wind for a while.
Yeah. Well, I've never done anything like that, but there have been several times that my adult daughter has decided that she was going to leave the nest and move away. And one time she decided she was going to move to Denver. And we were in the car one day driving along, and she said, you know, I think I'm going to go to Denver. And I said, really? I said, do you know anybody there? Nope. I said, well, when are you planning on going? She said, next week. She did have a job like at Lowe's, so she could transfer. And so I went with her out there and left my car with her, flew back so that she could have the car. And then she did that again when she moved to Portland, and I did all the traveling with her, and that was so cool. And so when you were saying that about the playlist, that's what made me think about it, because even vacations, she's usually the one that's in charge of the playlist. And so she'll have her Spotify on, and I'll tell her, ooh, I really like that song. Save that one for me. So she creates this little folder for me so that when I get back, it says songs for mom. But it's like anytime one of those songs comes on from any of those trips, I'm transported back to that time. To me, what music can do is just amazing. So I was almost thinking when you were saying that when you were at that Airbnb that y'all were singing songs and things, I was thinking, I bet anytime one of those songs comes on, you're right back in that place. So the power of music is just amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, that is my happy place. And I still have the playlist he made for that trip on
Oh, wow.
my
How
phone
many
and play
songs
that
is it?
for
It's got to be a lot.
Oh yeah, there's a lot. And definitely some I would not normally listen to, but it's fun to just put them on, and especially if I'm driving, taking a little trip, I just put it back on and I'm right back there, and it's really an awesome thing to for us to share. I mean, we
Yeah.
still do it from time to time. He still lives at home, but he's kind of at that age. He's 22. He's actually about to launch, and so he's doing his own thing, and we really don't get to talk a lot now because he's just too busy. I'm too busy. So we actually, but I mean, we were trapped in a car for days and days and days. So we talked about everything. So that
Oh,
was a really good memory for sure.
oh, man, I'm envious because that's got to be amazing. Yeah, because I do cherish each one of those trips that my daughter and I've taken. And we do roommate. We room together now, but she could at the drop of a hat suddenly decide she's going to move somewhere. And I even told her one time, I said, you can visit places. You don't always have to just move. I know, but that's what she does. But anyway, so the relationship that you were getting away from, how long were you married?
Um, well, we were married for about 10 years. And then things kind of came to a head, and protection orders and the whole nine, and so we split up, and I got us out of there. And it took him 10 years, but he got back into my good graces, and I actually got remarried to this guy. I'm a slow learner, okay? Um,
You're
and
not
it
the
was,
only one.
yeah, it was about 6 months into that period that I realized that was like the worst thing I had ever done for myself ever, and the kids too. And so that ended quickly. Well, it started to end quickly, but it
It
was
started
a
going
very
down
lengthy.
down
It
south,
was it
right?
was well, it was a lengthy process to get through it all. I
Yeah.
don't recommend 5-year divorce plans. They're not great.
Oh, well, I have a friend that her divorce ended up taking, I don't know how many years. It was years and years and years and tons of money and heartache and all that stuff. And it's like, holy smokes, maybe it'd been better just to separate and forget about it. But it's like
Yeah.
crazy, right? So when you got out of that situation, and if you want to dive into some of the stuff that you were dealing with, you're welcome to do that too, and share a little bit. That's entirely up to you. I know you have a lot of twists and turns into your journey, so I don't know what feels comfortable to you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't talk a lot about it. It
Okay.
happened. And it's kind of a topic for another day because that has to do with kind of some of my bigger goals in life
Okay.
that I do want to talk about. But I think to what you were saying earlier is it's all part of the mosaic. And if I hadn't had those really awful experiences, I wouldn't have got where I am now. And so what kind of comes up for me with that was two things that came out of that time before I actually left town is with my oldest son, he was already out of the house and everything, but he was really involved in the local music scene. And I went to one of his productions. He was actually the general manager of the radio station at Green River Community College in Washington State, which is Green River Community College is where Nirvana was discovered. The stage that they
Oh,
have at the college is the first stage where they were really noticed.
wow.
So that's kind of their claim to
Yeah.
fame. But he was in charge of that radio station. It was an alternative radio station, and of course after those days, unfortunately for him, but I he had put on a big benefit show for the radio station. And so he was really stressing out because they hadn't sold a lot of tickets. So, I'm like, I'm going to be a good mom. So I was like, oh, I'll go. It's going to be awful, but I'll go. And I went, thinking this was just going to be this painful, awful night of all these amateur wannabe rock stars singing music I wasn't interested in, but I was going to kind of fake it
Put on
till
your happy
I
face.
made it there. Yeah. And, I got there, and the very first act up was some young folks, a band called Riot and Rhythm, um, probably in their late teens at the time. And they were really good. I was pleasantly surprised. And then the second act came on, and that was a band called Amadon. Unfortunately, they're no longer together, but they blew my mind. And I was just instantly fangirling over these young folks. They're a little bit older than the first group, but I wanted to buy their CD. They had a little EP because they're local musicians, and it was like $5. But my youngest son, the one that I went on the road trip with, had gone with me, and he'd used all my cash to buy snacks. So I didn't have any cash on me, and I wanted to buy their CD. And by that time, at that time, it wasn't as easy to do, Stripe
Cash
and all
App
that
and
stuff.
Venmo and all that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, well, I've got $3, and I'm like trying to borrow $2 from my friends around, and nobody had any cash. And the bass player of the band, he's like, you know what? Don't worry about it. If you want it, here, I got you. I'll cover your $2. So I made a point of going to their next show with this sole intent of making sure that I gave him back his $2, because they were really good. And I know that they were struggling, they were trying to make their way, and I didn't want to short him. So after that, it was kind of a interesting journey because I started going to more and more shows, and I got connected with the Seattle local music community, and they just welcomed me with open arms. Here I was a middle-aged mom, not very cool, but it didn't matter. And they were so good to me. And I actually learned how to play guitar, and I was the band mom,
Wow.
I eventually for Amadon. And I think part of that is it kind of plays into the trip with my younger son, because when I was on my way to California with him, he looked at me one day and he said, Mom, you've got your colors back. And that was just like, whoa. I hadn't realized during the course of those years where I was in that relationship how much I had let go of me, who I was. I mean, I
Mm,
honestly had no idea who I was. And then
yeah.
when I started going to these shows and meeting these new people, I'd never hung out with rock stars before, you know, and they were nice, they were cool, they liked me. And so I kind of started stepping into that was part of the beginning of me stepping into knowing who I was and saying, you know what, I'm going to be that, and if people don't like it, too bad.
Yeah.
And that showed on the journey that I took with my younger son that would have never happened before that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, one of the reasons that I started talking about the Mosaic life is because I sat back and I thought, as I was starting the podcast and everything, about the different things that's happened to me in my life. And each one of them, there was a lesson that I could pull out of it and learn. Some of them were horrible things, but I could find the lesson and I could see how that thing had changed me and made me stronger and made me kind of take a different route than I would have otherwise. And as I really sat and thought about that, I thought, I really love who I am. I love where I've landed. I'm not always happy with everything, but I love me and my life. And if I hadn't went in all those things, I thought, where would I be? Would I, you know? And so it's like, that's when I decided, that's what this has got to be about. It's our pieces of our life, putting us together and showing us, these beautiful pieces like about the kitsumi art, right?
Mhm.
And so to me, for those that are watching or listening, that's the Japanese art of taking the broken pottery and filling the cracks with gold. And then it makes them even stronger and more beautiful. So I love that too, because it shows us that all the little cracks and things that have happened to us in our life, we've just, by being who we are, we've filled them with gold and we've made ourselves even more beautiful and stronger through the process.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's once you realize that, it's a game changer. You're
Mm-hmm.
like, instead of being afraid of all the things that happen, it's like, okay, bring it on, because this is just gonna build me into a better me, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I will say sometimes I say, okay, God, you can be a little more gentle.
Yeah, yeah. My mom used to talk about that. There was she'd heard the saying, God won't ever give you more than you can handle. But she's like, gosh, I wish he didn't trust me so darn much.
I know. He's kind of overestimating me a little bit here. And it makes me think, and I know this is a little bit off of the topic, but I was dating a guy one time that I I was kind of, thinking that something wasn't right and I couldn't quite put my finger on it. And you know how, and being in having that relationship you had, I'm sure it was the same, not the same, but had some of these qualities where you have this thing where you think, well, something's not right. And they have a
Mhm.
way of making it like, you're silly, there's nothing going on, there's nothing wrong. So anyway, I finally got to the point where I said, okay, God, you got to either help me make peace with this, that everything's fine, or you got to show it to me in a way that I can't ignore it. Should have never said that last part, because the next day it was like everything blew up. The amount of things that were going on was just like poof, you know. And so later on I said, okay, God, I didn't mean that much. So I'm really careful now. Don't ever test the waters there. And it's funny because I asked for exactly what I got. There was no way I could ignore that. And so sometimes, it's one of those life lessons that we get and we do the best with it, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Boy, I feel really lucky now because I was in a similar spot at one point where I was done. I was done, done, done. I'd been through so much, and it was so intense for so long, and I had finally gotten free again because I had to do it again because I was not smart. And that's when he pulls out that, hey, let's go to counseling card. Mind you, the entire past 20 years, I'd said, hey, anytime you want to go, let's do this. I want to do this. Now he wants to go. And at this point, I was like, no way, I'm not doing this. And I was like, no, I said I would. I'm a woman of my word. I'm gonna go. So I went, and that first session went about as well as you probably think it did.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
remember the counselor asking us both to start us off. What do you think the problem is? And of course, I said communication because that's what people always think is the problem. It's the
Right.
safe thing to say. I hear it often from my clients. And he said, she is. I was like, okay, I'm done. So
All
I'm
right.
driving. I'm driving home and and I had to pay for half of it. He insisted we go, but then I had to pay for half of it. And I was like,
That should have
whatever,
been your
right?
first clue right there.
Right? No kidding. Like I said, I was a slow learner. But a late bloomer, but I got there. But on the way home, I'm just crying out to the universe, please, please, I don't want to do this anymore. I can't stand it, but I just feel so guilty. I need a sign. And just as I said that, on the right-hand side, I was going up the hill. There was a brand new billboard sign on the side of the road, not really a billboard, but a wooden sign, pretty good sized. And it was a local business, I guess, that was getting ready to shut down. And it said in great big letters, "We quit after 20 years." I was like, got it. So that was a huge relief. And
Yeah,
so
that
got
is
lucky
too
with that one.
funny.
I actually paid attention to that one.
Good, good.
Yeah.
Because there's no
Yeah.
telling what the next sound would have been, right?
Yeah. For sure.
But since then,
Mhm.
you've met the love of your life. And the one thing I've got to ask you about is you said that you met because of some kind of stupid phone game. What is that?
It's so embarrassing.
I will
I
tell
shouldn't
it
have even put
anyway.
that down because it's so embarrassing, but I'll tell you. Um, in the later days of the dying relationship, my ex was playing a phone game all the time. He was on his phone all the time, and I was bored and lonely. And I was like, fine, I'll get my own phone game. So I just downloaded some random thing. It was a game called Game of Sultans. It's terrible. Don't go look for it. And in
Don't
this
invest
game,
in that one.
yeah, just don't. But in this game, again, it was kind of like the music community thing because I had been so isolated. I guess I was just starved for community, but they had they'd have you could join teams and be
Hmm.
on a team together. And so I had done that, and the team that I was on had a Discord server, and so then some of the other groups had Discord servers, so you could chat with each other in Discord. If you're not familiar with Discord,
Yeah, I'm
usually
familiar.
real gamers use it,
Yeah.
not phone gamers, but it was really if people aren't into games, it's kind of like Slack, okay.
Yeah.
But so we were talking and we were just friends. We were hanging out. He was on one of the other teams and we just kind of hit it off and we were just chit-chatting and just having a grand old time playing our game together. And I didn't think anything of it. He was way off in another part of the world. And at that time I was just I didn't even relationships weren't even on my radar. Like I
Right,
need to
right.
close out what I was doing anyways, but I really was like, no, I'm kind of done with that for now.
Yeah.
And I was, but he was just, a good friend through it all. And I made several good friends in there. Like I said, it was very much like the music community in that everybody just accepted everybody. And it didn't really matter who you were, where you were from, what you did. Um, we just connected. And I still am in touch with several of the people from that group, even though we don't play anymore. So, um, but yeah, so that's how we got to know each other. But I didn't really have any intentions of getting in a relationship. I actually embarked on about a 3-year journey at that point to train myself and learn what I was doing wrong. Because after going through this twice, I was like, you know, I'm part of the problem here. So I took a lot of classes and I started training with some really well-known relationship gurus. Uh, and spent about 3 years and about $20,000 on that. I mean, I really dove into it. And my intention at first was just to learn how to do better for myself. And I was like, no way am I getting in a relationship until I have this figured out because I am not going through that again.
Mm.
But as I started developing my own self-love and learning how to communicate better and just generally leveling myself up in relationship space, um, things just kind of happen, my now husband, I guess, noticed that I was pretty awesome.
And
now
who
that I
wouldn't?
actually like I act now that I actually felt like I was instead of feeling like I was just a complete loser all
Right.
the time. Um, and just that um, attraction just grew and I didn't really want to be in a relationship, but then I was. And then I found out the really cool thing, the kind of magic to it is all words. Yay, live video. But the magic to it all is um, when you're not looking for it, that's when it comes. And you actually can heal better, I think, I've learned from relationship trauma in relationship, as long as you know what you're doing.
Right.
And as long as you are with a partner who is willing to learn too.
Yeah.
And that's what I got.
Yeah.
So it's been
Beautiful.
absolutely amazing. Um,
So
yeah,
where
I
did he
mean,
live compared to you?
he's here in Michigan. That's how I ended up here. When I got
Okay.
to
So you were in
Tennessee,
California and he was
yeah,
in
I was in
Michigan.
California at the time.
Okay.
And then I came to Tennessee, so at least we're in the same time zone.
Right.
But and that's about when we kind of started saying, hey, was when I was in Tennessee. But I started working at Amazon as I had been an HR professional pretty much most of my adult life, anyways. So I worked in their HR structure. And after I'd been there about 2 years, I had an opportunity to transfer up to Michigan and open a brand new facility on the site of the old Silverdome where the Lions used to play.
Mm.
And so I got to do that while I was also moving closer to this amazing human. So it was a very exciting time.
Wow, wow, that's impressive.
Yep.
I've got a client right now that she is she lives here in Georgia
Mhm.
and she's dating a guy that lives in Texas. And they met on one of the gaming things. They were gaming together and everything,
Mhm.
and they just chatted, and there was nothing, and then there was. And so now he's come here to visit her. She's gone there, and she's talking about, she's going to be moving to Texas within the next year or two to be closer to him. And it's like, wow, so much. You don't even have to get on those dating sites, right? You just play a game.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was really cool because we actually really got to know each other on a very deep level before we ever actually spent physically time together. And I think that might be the way to go because
Yeah,
it takes all that pressure off. There wasn't any, oh gosh, I got to look just so, or I got to act just so. It was just, hey, who are you as a person? And
yeah,
we went deep. I mean, we have a whole server that we created, and I still go back and look at it from time to time. I mean, we talked about everything.
well,
It,
it's funny because I used to say that dating wouldn't be bad if you could kind of start in the middle. It's because you have to start in the beginning, and then there's that awkward time of meeting for the first time in person and having the little nice chit chat stuff, the stuff that doesn't mean anything, you care less about, but it's like you got to make conversation, because if you tell anybody your dirty laundry right off, they're out of there, so
Mhm.
that's beautiful. And so anybody that's watching or listening, now you know how to meet the love of your life. Just be a gamer and connect to somebody special there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, it's not even just this relationship. I mean, that's been the most amazing thing, but I have lifelong friends now. And
Yeah.
like we've all moved on. We don't play that game anymore. But they're on my Christmas card list. I actually even have on my Christmas tree, I have little silver picture frames with all my friends. And there's
Oh,
several of them from
cool.
that game on there. So
Oh, nice. Well, I'm not playing games, but from my podcast, and then I
mhm.
do coaching online, I do hypnosis online, and I've met so many people that I never would have had the opportunity to meet otherwise. I mean, this platform, if there's anything that came good out of COVID, it's this kind of stuff, because before that, you just didn't do it this way. And because I probably never would have met you,
Yeah, yeah, never in a
so
million
it's
years.
amazing. And so I'm always appreciative of all of these ways that some of the people that I've met, I get a chance to meet in person at one point.
Mhm.
Some of them I've known them for a very long time now and never met them in person at all, but it feels like I've have them in my house all the time.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
It's
So
it's just it's just a neat way to connect.
it is. And even though we're a distance away, right? But we're close at the same time. The thing that's always amazing to me is, you've probably had this experience too. You walk into a room full of people, and who vibrationally feels comfortable,
Yeah.
and you gravitate toward them, right? And you can tell right away when somebody walks up, I don't know, there's something about them I just don't like, or wow, I feel like I've known them forever. And that still translates on this platform, So that's mind-boggling to me, because I used to feel like it was that you were in their proximity, right?
Mhm.
But it still, the energy still transfers over this platform. So I just think it's amazing.
Yeah, yeah, it's really astonishing how connected you can be without being in somebody else's presence. I even have some friends who are, practitioners that do Reiki and stuff like that, and they are able to do that via Zoom, and that was just a mind blown for me. I'm like,
Yeah,
wow,
I know.
really?
And I've got a
How?
friend that
But it
does Reiki
works.
too. And when she's done it with me, I can feel the vibe. I'm thinking, whoa, right? So it's crazy. So one of the things that I wanted to ask you too is Scotland is one of the places that I've always wanted to go and I never have. And you got to travel and have your dream wedding in Scotland.
Yep.
So how the hell did that happen? Or, is he Scottish? What's the deal?
His family, part of them come from Scotland. He's never been there. He's, not super into the culture, but he was talking about it. And when we were planning to get married and we were trying to decide where to do it because of course most of my family's on the West Coast, his family's here. So we're like, do we do it in the middle? That's weird because we don't even know anybody in the middle of the country. Like it's just dude, this is so awkward. What because either way we're making somebody travel and ugh. She's like, you know what, forget it. Let's just elope. Okay, well, yeah, we'll just go. And then we were kind of rattling around ideas of pretty places to go in the US. And I was like, well, what if we just did it in Scotland? And I was being completely facetious. I was kidding. And he's like, oh yeah, we should totally do that. I'm like, wait, what? So we did. And it was absolutely amazing. I found a castle that was an Airbnb. They had
Oh,
it. So we booked that, and so we actually were staying in a castle. And then we rented a car. We drove all around. We went from Glasgow up to Inverness, back or around the whole north coast, and then down back into the castle that we stayed in was about 45 minutes north of Edinburgh. So then we drove into Edinburgh and did some tours there, did the whole Outlander tour. I mean, it was just,
ooh,
we did a Harry Potter tour. Um, and then my dearly beloved, the day after we got married, at least he waited till then, um, decided to break his ankle. So,
oh
so we got to
no.
experience the
The medical
wonderful
profession there?
medical profession of Scotland, and it was absolutely a good experience. I mean, it was a long wait in the ER, like it would be anywhere on a Saturday night. But other than that, they were so kind and so just really wonderful people. And it didn't cost us a penny. Yes, I love Scotland.
Wow. So how long were you supposed to be there?
We were there for about 3 weeks. And so we
Okay.
still had 4 days left before we left. And we had planned on going up into the mountains, into the Cairngorms to a little eco cabin and just be away. That was we'd done all the touring already. So we were just
Right.
going to go, just be in this little cabin in the woods. And we didn't get to do that. So we'll have to go back. But
See?
instead, we had a wonderful time in a lovely airport right by the hotel for 4 days, sitting watching TV.
Well, that's hysterical.
Yeah.
That's some good memories, right?
Yeah, it was fun. And I learned that I absolutely can push a wheelchair and manage a trolley with 5 suitcases on it simultaneously. I am that good.
And that's a gift and an art, because I've had to do that before too with somebody in a wheelchair, and it is the extremely excruciating. To me, the hardest part was the bathroom part,
Mm-hmm.
because you can't, what do? You can't take all this luggage in. And it's like, so it was like the weirdest thing to try to maneuver and take care of the luggage at the same time in the bathroom.
Yeah.
It was strange. But so as I'm thinking about all the things that you've done, how, and I know you're a coach, so as all of these things that have come together, and you said that you studied relationship coaching and everything, so how does that translate now. So how do you help people? And, you can tell people a little bit about what your coaching is like, who's a good fit for your coaching, anything that you feel like you want to share would be good.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear
So
myself.
yeah. So like I said, my journey started just me trying to get myself right. But as things developed and I realized what a life-changing experience this was, that figuring this out, figuring out my relationship with myself first, and then being able to have, like, I wouldn't have known a healthy relationship if it came up and bit me before that, I
Right.
just didn't have a point of reference. And so I didn't know how to do it, but now I had the skills. And so when I embarked on this relationship, like, my husband, he's amazing. He's the kind of guy that will say, "Yeah, sure, let's go to Scotland and get married," right? I mean, that's pretty cool. But he's not easy. He has his own struggles from his own experience of life.
As we all
And
do, right?
yes, and our particular triggers flow up together really neatly. So we've had lots and lots and lots of opportunities to practice my new skills. But that's the cool part. It's practice. And so that's what I do with people. I have a couple different ways that they can work with me. I am starting my second group program in August. I started one this month. And that is mostly around the communication piece. It's called Communication for Connection. And then I also work directly with couples, and I got to tell you, it is the most amazing job in the world. I had to do it. I had to. I didn't have a choice. I gave up my big corporate career and all my big paycheck because I wanted people to have what I have, because it has absolutely changed my life. And seeing that happen in front of me in real time, week in and week out, with all these different couples, I am the happiest I've ever been. It's an amazing thing to see that anybody can do this. They just have to want to, and then they have to do the work and they have to practice. And that's where working with a coach comes in really handy, because you can go
Mhm.
on the internet and read all about how to do communication better, how to use I statements, all that stuff's out there in the world. But it's kind of like if you're trying to learn yoga from watching a video. You can sit there and try and emulate the instructor all you want, but if there's not somebody there next to you to say, well, not quite like that, do it like this, your form's not going to be very great and you're not going to get the full benefit of it.
Right.
And you might even hurt yourself, heaven
Yeah,
forbid.
that's
So
true.
it's much better for in that scenario and in relationship space to actually work with somebody that can kind of give you that little bit of guidance. And so that's really the bulk of what I do with folks. It's a little bit of instruction, but it's mostly them talking to each other and really getting connected and getting to know each other on a deeper level, and doing it skillfully, so that when things are a little bit crunchy, when things are hard to hear, they know how, and they know how to do it gently, and to actually turn their conflicts into rocket fuel for growth. Because if you think about it, having a relationship with no conflict sounds nice on the surface, but if you're never ever having to solve any difficulties together, you're not growing, you're not
Yeah.
learning, you're
Well,
stagnant.
the way I always look at it, if there's never any conflict, somebody's getting run over, because
Mm-hmm.
there is no way that two people can have
Right.
blissful, no conflict at all, unless one of them is constantly giving in. And that used to always be me, because I didn't like the conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can relate to this very well. And I used to tell people that whenever, saying whenever, because I don't know if I'll ever find somebody that I want to settle down with again or not. But if I do, I think we're going to go to some communication counseling beforehand, to make sure, because like you said something about it just a few minutes ago, about how you both come in with your own stuff. And so and the reason that you're drawn together is to help connect and to work through these things. So you're going to be triggering each other. That's just the nature of things. But if you don't know how to handle when somebody's your trigger, then it just blows up, and this is not worth it. And there's so many people that give up on a beautiful, beautiful relationship just because they either didn't have boundaries or they couldn't communicate. And part of it is the listening too, right? Learning to
Oh, yes.
listen. Yeah. I had a client one time, and it, to me, it was mind-boggling. And hopefully this is not anything that you do with your coaching. If it is, just say you don't. But, but anyway, her and her husband were having a horrible time. And I'm a hypnotist and a coach. So I was coaching her, but we were coaching on her self-esteem and
Mhm.
boundaries and, different things like that. Well, the things that they were going to marriage counseling, and every time they came back from marriage counselor, they had another code word. And I said, what? Yeah, when this happens, the code word is this, and then he knows that I'm upset, and then we walk away, and then we come back later and we talk about it. And next time there'd be another code word. I said, what do you have? This running list on the ceiling or something that has all these code words? I don't understand this. It was like, just learn to communicate instead of I don't know. I was just blown away with all the code word things, because to me it felt like it was sweeping it under the rug, and then they still next time code word, code word, and it never got anything. They did end up getting divorced, but it's one of those things that, and I will say that sometimes I have communication issues with my adult children too, because that boundary thing gets stretched, and then I don't like conflict. So it's like sometimes, not being able to speak up about things like that too. And so I can see how what you're doing is not only helping them as a married couple, but it can help them, because that learning all of that stuff translates out into your work environment, to your children. And so it's a life-changing kind of
Mhm.
communication thing. So I'm impressed.
Yeah, getting skilled at communication changes everything because anything you're doing with people is
Hmm.
communication. And it's funny that you bring up the adult child parent relationship because I actually was working with some folks with that recently that they're doing really well, and they're noticing that they're having a struggle with that boundary. So we actually worked on that some, and yeah, it's all interconnected. And but once you have the skill set, once you know how, you can apply it anywhere. And it's just so rewarding to see people have those aha moments and realize, oh, I can do this, I can do it. um, and like I said, there's just so many like people come in with preconceived ideas, people that have been to therapy, and I have nothing against therapy. It has its purpose, but I think couples therapy, well, at least in my experience, it was never very good for me. And the clients that I have that went through therapy first have universally said that the coaching was more effective for them as a couple. It's just that, and it's not that there's anything wrong with therapy. It's just that it's a different goal. It's a different
Hmm.
mindset. Coaching is so much present centered and moving forward, like, and it's more practical. It's like, how do we do this? We know, if you've been together with somebody for a long time, you kind of know where their stuff comes from,
Right, right.
usually. And we might talk about that in the context of what we're doing, but it's really more about, okay, that's great that you know that, but what do we do about it? How do you come together and be there for each other and support each other and understand each other and listen to each other? Um, Listening skills are not popular, and
I
we aren't taught
know.
them in this society, and especially this day and age, and so if you can learn to be a good listener, you're already halfway there.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree. So I agree with almost everything. Well, I agree with everything you said. Um, so let me just ask you, we're getting close to time. Let me ask you, um, is there something in particular? Let's say, I'm going to give you a couple of scenarios here. So one of the things that I'm curious about is if there's like a common theme, if there's something like you're working with a whole bunch of people, and is there one thing that seems to be most prevalent when it comes to this relationship therapy coaching that you do? And then the other thing is to give at least one solid piece of advice for someone who may be struggling a little bit with their communication. Maybe they don't even, maybe they're at the point where they're ready to walk away, but they've got so much tied into it that they really don't want to, but they don't know that it's worth the effort. Maybe if you can, address
Sure.
something with that.
Um, I think, well, we'll take them one at a time. The
Okay.
first thing, I'd say probably the most common thing I see people come in with is communication struggles. And it's really 99% of it is that they're just missing each other. Like they're talking, but they're talking this way instead of this way. They're just not connecting. And it's so painful and frustrating for both people, and they may handle it differently, but it all boils down to the same thing. Everybody wants to be heard and understood. And so most of the folks that I see, they're just not feeling heard and understood. And so if they can get to a place where they feel like their partner is hearing them and understanding them, a lot of times they're able to just move through the rest of the stuff fairly easily. That's like the first real high, that and then the mindset around conflict, of
Mhm.
just realizing, no, this is not a bad thing. And in fact, when my husband and I joke about it sometimes, it's like, man, I feel like I haven't been growing much. Can you pick a fight with me? Of course, we're kidding, but honestly, like it really is a huge catalyst for growth as a partnership. And so as long as it's nothing, terrible, as long as it's not an unforgivable thing, it's kind of good to have things come up that you can kind of dig into. Um, so as far as the people that are on the verge, which is most of my clients, it really depends. I think that it is worth a shot if your partner's willing to come. I think it's worth a shot because the willingness to learn is the key piece. And I think the frustration a lot of times is that people are afraid they're not going to be heard. And so they don't show up as their real selves. And I can help
Mm,
with. Um, and then it's also becomes very quickly clear if that's not where they're at. If the person really isn't interested in learning and growing, that becomes very evident very quickly. And so it can kind of help clarify, okay, maybe this isn't going to work out, which is a hard thing to deal with. And it's nice to have support if that's where you're headed to. So it can
yeah.
be beneficial either way. And I think it's worth figuring out, is this really viable or not? And the
Right.
best way to do that is to actually dig in, because what usually happens when you're trying to figure that out is you start avoiding it. We don't want to talk about it. It's too hard. It's too painful. And then you're left with that. Well, what if, even if you do split, it's like, well, gosh, what if we had done something? What if this had, and you don't want to live with that. So I
Yeah.
think it's really good and helpful to get a session or two, even if you're not sure, because it'll help you get clarity.
Beautiful, beautiful. I love that. I had these visuals in my mind of these couples, being able to actually sit down together and actually have a conversation or even be silent together. Because a lot of times people can't stand to be silent together unless it's like they're angry silent. But to just be satisfied and silent, that's beautiful to me too. I it made me think too. I had a time in my marriage where I went to a marriage counselor, and it was the very first counseling session. Now, it was a marriage counselor at the church too. So, um, but in the conversation, my husband said something that as soon as he said it, I said, hmm, okay, I don't think that we need to even go any further. I can tell this is the end for me. And that was it. And maybe if I'd had you instead of this pastor, maybe it would have been different. But it was like I felt like that what he had said was something I couldn't get past. But I didn't have anybody there, to help. And so to me, coaching is so powerful, because one of the things that I say all the time, and for those that are listening or watching, forgive me, but we can't see our own shit. When we're in the middle of everything that's happening, we cannot see a way out. We can't see anything. And it takes a skilled coach to be able to look at us and say, oh, I see what's going on. Let's see if we can move this around a little bit and change our direction and see how you feel then, and give you some scenarios or things and ideas and inspirations of things to do. I mean, hell, there's not an athlete alive that does well that doesn't have a coach. So why we would think we would go through life and never need one, I don't know. But so I'm really grateful that you are there to do that for the people. And like, I'm not even dating anybody right now, but I'm going to make sure that I keep this this episode to the side, so it's like when I get into a relationship I'll call you and say, okay, because you do this online as well, not just in person,
Mhm.
right? Okay,
Yep.
beautiful,
Yep.
beautiful. All right, so I don't know when I'm hiring you, but it will be at some
Yep.
point.
I love it when people are proactive and come in. It's exciting to see people thinking ahead like that and saving themselves so much drama and pain. Um, but even if you didn't do it that way, come on in. I can help you. I have very, very, very high rate of success with the folks that I see.
Beautiful, beautiful. So thank you so much for being here. And I'm going to leave everybody with my favorite quote. The best way to predict the future is create it. So what are you creating? And let's all be proactive in our creation. And with that, I will say thank you for joining me, and I will see you soon. Mwah.
Thank you, Vicki. It's been great.